The Auditor-General says only 16% out of 257 municipalities received a clean audit report. Now, most of these municipalities are on the verge of collapse. Joining me now for some insight into what needs to be done in these municipalities and, I suppose, the process to try and lift them out of this particular mess. We are joined by the Auditor-General Tsakani Maluleke. Ms. Maluleke, thank you very much for making the time to talk to us here. It's a very important day on this channel where we are shining the spotlight on the state of these municipalities. So let me get this right. 41 out of a total 257 municipalities receiving clean audits. Does that talk to the 16% you are talking about? And if we are correct, you've got to tell me why you are not of the opinion that these municipalities are facing a total collapse.
So good morning, Xoli, and thank you for having me on the show. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for the care you've taken to read our report. If you look at a clean audit, right, so we look at three areas when we audit. We look at financial management, whether or not the financial reports that are submitted for audit are ultimately credible. Whether the performance information is useful and reliable. We also look at compliance matters. And then our audit reports also deal with some analysis of the state of internal controls, and then we have some commentary on whether or not we've identified material irregularities. And I point this out to really make the point that a clean audit gives you a good feel for the strength of the systems of transparency, accountability, and performance in an institution. If you've got only 41 clean audits, you've then got to ask yourself the question on why is it taking us so long to build institutions that have got strong systems, that are accountable, that are transparent, and ultimately perform, and perform in accordance with their mandate, their reason for being, right? Yeah. When we look at this, we realize that you've got 41 clean audits, you've got 100 auditees, 100 municipalities that could at least publish credible financial information, which is a good thing. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you realize that instead of getting 41 and 100 with credible financial information together, if the Auditor General had stopped auditing on the first set of financials, you'd only be able to report that 62 municipalities in total can report faithfully on their financial management. The reason this is important is that it tells you about the journey of building capability in institutions. If you can't put a set of financial statements that are credible when the AG arrives for audit, it says that your normal financial management practices and disciplines are weak. Yeah. And that often then translates into your ability to plan for performance, budget for performance, and execute your service delivery programs properly. And that's not happening. And then it also tells you about the ability of those institutions to make sure that they operate within the law, within the provisions of the law, particularly around procurement. So it is concerning that we're not yet making the headway we should around building these municipalities as capable institutions.
And we're going to get to the element about the material irregularities in a bit. But as you've painted the picture last week, the situation is not improving. If anything, it is regressing. And for the first time in the history of the Auditor General's office, my understanding is that you have had to refer 6 municipalities to the Financial Intelligence Center, and that's to basically probe why it is that these municipalities cannot explain how money has left their bank account, but it is not known what that money was used for. It's untraceable. So my question to you is not how this is possible, but rather why take the long, winding route instead of simply going for criminal charge, taking these people, whoever is responsible, to law enforcement for brazen looting or theft of public money?
So the way we audit is we have to get evidence before we can act on it. And part of the analysis we did in this instance was getting us to pinpoint that the lack of attention to financial management disciplines does result in dysfunction, not just in terms of how resources are being managed, financial resources are being managed, but also in terms of how the other resources and assets of the municipality are being managed. So we even looked at, as you rightly know, the infrastructure, and we're able to really link directly the repeat disclaimers, which is the worst audit opinion you can get, to dysfunction, not just on financial management, but in terms of service delivery. So the 6 you're referring to, what we did was we said, often people look at a disclaimer of audit opinion as a technical auditing issue. How can we build some transparency around this and get everybody in the accountability ecosystem understanding how intolerable it is for a municipality to continue to operate on the basis of a disclaimer and how they are dodging accountability, right? So then we did this analysis. We said to our teams, can we just go and look at these bank accounts and see where is the money going, because we can't certify the financial statements as being credible. And that's why when we found these 6, where we're none the wiser as to where the money went, so we've had to refer it to the FIC, who have the tools, the mandate, to then go and look deeper into it. When that information comes back, then we can act on it. It's important that we get proper evidence before we take the next step.
What went through your mind when you, I suppose, sent your officials to say, actually look into the bank accounts? Because this is something that I think, as you put it last week, you probably had not done it before, where you actually physically go and look into the bank accounts, and you just couldn't trace this. I'm asking you this because in South Africa, the looting of public funds, where bags of money are literally taken out of state institutions so that nothing can be traced. That's no longer a myth in South Africa, thanks to the Zondo Commission. And so, did that surprise you, that you could not trace monies and how they left the bank account to where they went?
It did. So a disclaimer, we know, typically affords those that run a municipality to dodge accountability, because no one can rely on financial statements. You then can't take action. You don't know what to do with it. And then I was worried that as South Africans, we're becoming quite tolerant of something we should not tolerate, which is this idea of disclaimers, and the ones that have repeat disclaimers, right? And so I was trying to get to a point where our office can add value into transparency by saying what really goes on with these disclaimer municipalities. Yeah. So the teams went off and they came back and said, look, out of the 10, we can at least see where the money went in 4 instances, but in the 6, we can't. And of course, it is shocking, because you would expect that at the very least, you can see where the money went, right? In these instances, you can't. And I often give the example of a checkbook, where somebody writes a check but then doesn't bother to fill in the stub, so that a month later or a year later, there's nothing in the stub, so you don't know where the money went. So this is not a lack of skills, it's not a lack of capacity, it's just somebody who decided they don't want to account for public funds.
So tell us then in simple language what a material irregularity notification is, and how dire is the situation there?
So as you know, we were given these new powers, and really they are designed to help us enforce accountability by following up on the implementation of our recommendations, right? The way the MI process works is that it still follows the key principles underpinning public finance management, which says that the accounting officer, that your municipal manager or city manager, who is responsible for that institution, they must still account. They must still act when there's an audit finding, either from the AG or from an internal audit. So they remain responsible. So these powers allow us to follow up on whether or not they're fulfilling their responsibilities as given in law. If there's a non-compliance or if there's a problem identified through an audit, the expectation and the law actually says that the accounting officer must act. They must go investigate, then they must act on that investigation and its recommendations. They must recover funds. They must stop contracts that are irregular. They must stop the harm if it's causing harm to the public or to an institution, all of that. They must report matters to law enforcement. So if, when we raise an MI, the accounting officer takes that notification and does what they're supposed to do, then we've got to give them space to do that. So what we would do is say, okay, we've now found this MI, go and investigate. Or they'll refer for investigation. If they don't, then we'll step in by referring for ourselves. I beg your pardon. And if that investigation comes back and they act on it, then it's fine.
Yeah.
It's only if they don't act on it that we issue a recommendation.
AG, that's one of the questions that I'm going to come to you with, by the way. So start gathering your thoughts around the district development model. But let's finish off the conversation around the material irregularities. So once that notice has been issued and it is not properly addressed by the municipality, then
we can start to implement our powers. We can refer the matter for investigation ourselves because the accounting officer has failed to do that. When the investigation comes back, we'll then give a recommendation, which is much firmer than the recommendation from the audit process, that says, now that the investigation has come back, do the following. If they don't implement our recommendation, then we will issue binding remedial action. That's even firmer, right? Now things are escalating. And if they implement that, that's fine, but if they don't, if they still ignore our remedial action, then we will issue a certificate of debt. The certificate of debt goes in the name of the accounting officer whose failure to act after multiple opportunities has actually led to this problem, either financial loss or harm to the public or harm to the environment or loss of a material public resource. The reason the law is designed like that is that the accounting officer remains at the center of accountability in an institution. So it's not looking for us to put punitive measures that punish the contractor who benefits inappropriately. That's a matter for law enforcement, right? Yeah. Ours is focusing on the role of the accounting officer, which is why it's really quite critical that we worry about the quality of people that are in the roles as MMs, because the law gives them huge authority, huge responsibilities. So we've got to make sure it's people who are ethical, people who are competent, people who are disciplined, and people who are responsive. Because Trick question. What happens if that accounting officer resigns in order to escape culpability? So unfortunately, what that means is we have to almost start all over again because there's a new accounting officer. The problem doesn't go away, but the new accounting officer has to now take on the role of acting. So we give them an opportunity. So the thing takes longer, but we do have to follow it to the nth degree. We've seen it now. Following last year's elections, a number of accounting officers have changed. So what that means is we've had to take a bit of a step back and allow them to familiarize themselves with the issue, set up their own responses, and then we can monitor. In Ngakamudiri Mulema, which you were talking to a few minutes ago, or your colleague was talking to, what we found there was the accounting officer was not so responsive initially. But then with the new mayor, that mayor said to us, look, can you give me an opportunity to work with this accounting officer so that we respond appropriately? So we must give them that opportunity. It's only if they continue to fail that we will issue a certificate of debt. So it takes a while, but it's an important instrument because it is still enforcing the accounting officer to do what they're supposed to do.
Quick comment on this, AG. Your overall picture of the skills in these municipalities, particularly for those of CFOs, the municipal manager, what's your overall sense?
Skills are not where they should be, and that's why capability of the institutions is so weak. When you've got CFOs in their roles, when they've got people in their finance units employed, and yet they can't do the basics, they wait for the end of the year, hire consultants, very expensive consultants, just for the simple task of putting financials together. It tells you that skills are low, but worse still, discipline is low. So you've got to worry about both of those things.
So let's go back to the Free State. One of the municipalities there, in fact, is the only metro. I don't need to tell you this because you know, Mangaung is under administration. We had the opportunity to talk to the head of department of the COCTA in the Free State. That's the person who oversees the running of municipalities. So I asked him the question whether the situation is improving as they try to fix that metro in order to get back to its feet. But he not only reports that they are getting death threats as a result of them trying to help the situation in Mangaung, but that they've had to pull out as a province in trying to assist this municipality. But let's have a listen quickly to the head of department there.
It was in April when the Premier wrote to the Minister of Finance and said, look, the team is having it difficult to make inroads in the municipality. And that's when National Cabinet resolved to implement Section 139, subsection 7, because the provincial government has actually failed. That's what the Act provides. In actual fact, we never failed, but because of the resistance, we had to call on national government to come and intervene. But they are still also experiencing the similar problems we experienced when we intervened in Mangaung, like I've just indicated. In the presence of the national government, the Mangaung municipality has not been able to pass their budget. So that tells you the extent to which we don't have commitment from political principle in the municipality to ensure that at least the budget is passed and ultimately provide services to the communities.
AG, that's the only metro in the Free State. So if you look at Mukaga, where Mbali Tetane was talking from just moments ago, you look at that situation, you're like, but how are services ever going to be rendered if the metro is not being assisted? If anything, there's resistance. I put it to you, you are swimming against the tide of corruption, and you're probably not going to win this fight.
Well, the role I play in leading the institution, I do together with the capable staff members of the Office of the AG, demands that we continue to swim against the tide and swim harder. Because we must win this battle. It's imperative, because our failure to do so has a direct link to the lived experiences of people in Mukaga. I listened to that interview. People in Nakamudiri Mulema and people in Bloemfontein or Mangaung. It all starts, Xoli, with political leadership. The role of council is so critical, because it is them that will decide who becomes the MM. And they must make that decision with a posture that says we're here to build an institution. So you must appoint for competence. If you do otherwise, then you're weakening the institution. They must insist that administration team be characterized by skills, competence, and discipline. And they must oversee them to make sure that that happens and hold them accountable when they don't. They must give them space to operate in the administration instead of interfering. It's really centralized around the role that political leadership must play in each of these municipalities. Set up a capable administration, give them space, and hold them accountable.
I'm glad you raised the role of the politicians. These are councillors. These are the people who sit in the municipal public accounts committees. You'll correct me if I'm wrong here. These are the same people who sit in the audit committees. If those are the same people who are blocking the passing of the Mangaung budget, as you heard from the head of department, what hope is there, Auditor General, that the district development model is going to take flight in the near future?
I'll just correct one thing you said. The audit committee is comprised of professionals, so it's not council. So they support the MM, but you're quite right, the MPAC is council members. In terms of the district development model, I think it's good that we drive better coherence and coordination at the planning for projects and service delivery programs, right? Its success is still going to be dependent on the capacity in these institutions, the local municipalities, the district municipalities.
If that capacity is deliberately undermined?
Then it's not going to work. It's not our experience, because remember, we audit every single municipality every single year. And we've been able to see how a strong district municipality can have a good, strong, effective impact on the local municipalities. And then the reverse is true. A weak district municipality can't support the local municipalities, and capacity just continues to be weakened over time.
Is it not your view, Auditor General, that there is a deliberate weakening of skills in order for those who are in positions of authority, but politically, in order for them to get what they are looking for? Because you can't say that the situation has continued to worsen. The last report you put out, irregular spending was at just over 7 billion. It's now grown to over 9 billion. Something is not right.
For as long as the posture of the political leadership isn't one that's about ethical conduct, about building strong capacity and capability within a municipality, you're going to have weakening of the institution. And those choices are about whom they hire, whom they sanction when they do wrong, whom they reward when they do right or wrong. The culture that is set, that tone must be set right at the top of the political leadership. So I agree with you. Without a stable council that sets the right tone, you're not going to be able to build the capacity within a municipality. When we look on the other extreme, so some of the municipalities that are able to maintain clean audit outcomes year on year, they will vouch that their strength comes from political leadership and administrative leadership understanding their roles as distinct yet complementary. Everybody plays their part, whether you're talking to, say, a new municipality or one of the 22 municipalities in the Western Cape. What you find is that where there is stable council that also sets up a stable and competent administration, gives them space to do their work and holds them accountable, has a posture of continuous improvement, systematic improvement and strengthening of the institution, that's when you win. Anything short of that, you don't. A reliance on quick fixes. Let's get consultants to put financials together for the AG and then look away. A reliance on quick fixes. Let's get the provincial treasury or the provincial COCTA to come and help us with this set of financials for submission, and then we look away. That's not going to help us build the capability that we must.
The other element you've just touched on, actually, you remind me, the use of consultants. Yes, you said last week that the Limpopo province, the municipalities there, on the up, that's the trajectory. Things are improving, but there's the over-reliance on consultants. In the Eastern Cape, you have found that a consultant was being used and paid, I think, some 34 million to try and help one of the municipalities there. And that is just to help them fix things that have to do with SARS. But then he says, I must also get a portion of this money once I've done things right for you. Shouldn't there be a clawback of monies from these very consultants?
You know, sure, a number of consultants ought to behave very differently, right? But it all starts with the people that run this institution, the MM, the CFO, the MPAC, the council, the mayor. To what extent are they worried about building capability in that institution and holding people accountable? Because that example you make, in this instance, there is a CFO in place. They go and hire someone to help them with a VAT return for 34 million rand. Who's signing that contract, right? And who's overseeing these decisions? Because somebody is accountable for the procurement exercise, for even the payment of these consultants, and somebody in the institution is supposed to oversee that the right decisions are being made. If that CFO is still in their role after doing this, you've got to make some hard inquiries about the culture within that institution, about the tone that's being set by the council, by the mayor, and the MM.
We're winding down on this. Mine is not to ask you political questions, and so I'm not going to ask you a political question, but I'm simply going to ask you, which province out of all 9 has managed to bring municipalities that could obtain clean audits? Which province is leading right now with the majority of clean audits?
The Western Cape. 22 of the 41 clean audits are in the Western Cape.
How do you think that sounds to the ANC?
I don't audit from a political point of view. Our job is to audit and deliver the reports. Hopefully it inspires people to do the right things because it demonstrates that attaining and maintaining a clean audit is doable, and that actually you can see the difference between an institution that is run well and one that isn't. And the impact on citizens is quite evident.
Does it not also tell you a story about political infighting that is happening in ANC-run municipalities, in ANC-run provinces?
What we found is that when you've got political instability at council level, you really don't win in terms of building institutional capability. If you look at Mogalakwena, being the municipality in Limpopo, they've had dysfunction at council level for many years, which translates into instability and therefore dysfunction at the administrative level. And it doesn't matter how much they spend on consultants to help them compile financials. The capacity of this institution is not improving, and that has a direct impact on the lived experiences of those citizens. So you've got to drive stability and then build from a posture that says we want to build strong institutions that must serve South Africans and generations of South Africans at that.
I'm going to ask you a final question, and so I'm going to be possibly as winding as is possible. You have said it yourself, that the province that has the majority of municipalities receiving clean audits is in the Western Cape. That province is in the hands of the Democratic Alliance. In the majority of other provinces, if we use the example of the Free State, the head of department of COCTA says, we have had to pull out as a province to try and help Mangaung, but they themselves, national government, that we called on to intervene, have had to, they're finding it difficult to intervene because in front of their faces, the municipal budget could not be passed. So again, I circle back to my original question to you. Is there a future for the district development model that is the blueprint from national government if the state of affairs is as it is? And who runs national government at the moment?
You know, as I said, the district development model is a good idea. It responds to one of the problems. It's not going to have any real impact for as long as the posture of those that are responsible for running municipalities doesn't shift to one that says we will build a strong institution, one that's characterized by systematic improvement in transparency, in accountability, in integrity and performance. For as long as you don't have that, any designed intervention is not going to have any meaningful long-term impact.
Why don't you just say the ANC has failed?
I can talk about different municipalities. I can give you a synthesis of what the facts are from what we've seen. You know, in many ways, regardless of who is the political party responsible for a municipality, our interest is on the tone that's being set by the political leadership responsible for that municipality, for that province, and ultimately for national government, and the support interventions that really have the posture of saying we must build strong institutions. The time for band-aids is long over. The time for looking away is long over. Every single person in that accountability ecosystem must be propelled into acting on their responsibilities.
Tsakani Maluleke, thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry for the difficult questions, political questions at the end there. That's the Auditor-General of South Africa. She's trying to do her best.